Good evening, and thank you for joining us at the ICAS Spring Symposium Veritas 2021. I'm Shinja Kim, President and Chair of ICAS. I welcome all of you to today's program with topics related to the Korean Peninsula issues and U.S. national security. Today, I will begin with an announcement for you. Admiral Charles Richard couldn't be here with us this evening due to a sudden scheduling conflict. However, we have a fitting speaker, General Ferdinand Stoss, on behalf of the Admiral. It's my pleasure to introduce today's special guest speaker, Major General Ferdinand B. Stoss. General Stoss is a Director, Plans and Policy, U.S. Strategic Command, Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. As Director, he is responsible for the development and sustainment of Department of Defense strategic war plans and strategic support for theater combatant commanders and for contingency planning. He assists in formulating and implementing strategy for U.S. Stratcom's Unified Command Plan, assigned defense responsibilities to include strategic deterrence, nuclear operations, global strike operations, and missile defense. He also supports the development of nuclear force postures, arms control policy, and leads the integration strategic deterrence activities with allies and partners. General Stoss entered active duty in 1988 after commissioning through the Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps program at Kansas State University. He served largely in the nuclear enterprise. Positions held include Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Launch Officer, Command Operations Evaluator, U.S. Strategic Command War Planner, Squadron Commander, Deputy Group Commander, Vice Wing Commander, and Wing Commander, Numbered Air Force Commander, and several nuclear-related staff positions. Other staff assignments include Air Force ROTC instructor duty and military assistant to the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Prior to his current assignment, General Stoss served as a commander, 20th Air Force Global Strike Command, Francis E. Warren Air Force Base, Wyoming. He holds a Master's of Science degree in Aerospace Operations from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, a Master of Science degree in History from University of Nebraska, Omaha. And he is a recipient of numerous Distinguished Service Award and decorations leading up to his current position. So with that, it is our honor to have General Stoss here with us today, and hope you enjoy the program, and let's give him a big welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Now the floor is yours.
Can you hear me, sir? Over?
Yes, very good.
Is the volume good? Okay, I see some thumbs up. Okay. So, by the way, everybody, if the sound goes out or we have a problem, maybe go thumbs down or make some funny gestures with your hands, and I'll try my best to either slow down and pause and see if the system can resync. But Sinja and Mr. Sanju Kim, thank you so much for moderating this as well. The introduction was too kind, but I have to apologize that my boss, Admiral Richard, had a short notice commitment change a couple of days ago. So his loss is my gain, I suppose, and so I do look forward to the next hour or so, and just wanted to let you know the boss really wanted to come here. Now the challenge is over to me now, though, but thankfully the boss already had a shell of a script, so I'm able to borrow some of his script. But I was scrambling the last couple of days, but I'm anxious to talk about several topics with you, and then reserve plenty of time for Q&A afterwards. So. One more thing that I'll just say and reiterate, and I'm sure all of you have seen the same thing. There is, of course, we're in, I don't know if it's a new abnormal with COVID or is it a new normal for the long term. Time will tell on where we go. So obviously we've lost the opportunities of being face to face and having that human interaction that we do for forums such as this. But sometimes I think there are some other advantages that we have greater attendance and be able to do things virtually. And we've learned the value of communication and perhaps even trust in the vein of conducting things virtually. Whereas before we used to have a lot of insistence or a lot more intimate elements from being face to face. So, anyways, I think there's always challenges with things like COVID, the tragedy that COVID has brought the world, but also the opportunities that you never want to let a crisis go without finding opportunities. So, anyways, my hat is off to the Institute. You're doing so many noble things where you're promoting relationships, you're conducting appropriate activities to enhance cooperations and pursue peace. And like I said, those are very noble things, and I think things that need to be embraced. So by building partnerships, fostering conversation, and the study these complex challenges, and these challenges aren't going to get easier over time. In fact, it's going to be the inverse. They're going to get more complex. And so having forums like this and institutes like this is very much appreciated and needed. And U.S. Strategic Command, Admiral Richard, and myself, the B or C team, trying to hold Admiral Richard's water, excited to chat with you about these things. So, I thought I'd hit a few areas. So talk about U.S. Strategic Command writ large, talk about the environment, and to talk about several of the challenges. Obviously, North Korea will be one of those topics, but I think there are other things worthy of discussing as well. U.S. STRATCOM is obviously a global warfighting command of over 150,000 American servicemen and women providing our nation's strategic deterrence. We do many things. We do strategic deterrence, we do nuclear operations, we do missile defense, global strike, and of course we do joint spectrum operations as well. Our mission, of course, is to deter strategic attack. And we are very careful to say strategic attack. That means the broad interpretation of that. Obviously, nuclear attack is a subset of strategic attack, but there are other forms as well. And then if there were to be such an attack, to employ forces as directed to guarantee security of our nation and our allies. In that vein, we have three priorities. The first one is going to be very apparent to you. It's going to be we provide strategic deterrence. And then the second one is going to be apparent as well. If deterrence were to fail, that we will deliver decisive responses, and we put the D in decisive here at U.S. Strategic Command. And third, we accomplish these with a resilient, equipped, and trained combat force. But of course, our jobs in doing these three priorities was always complex. It was complex during the Cold War, had a different complexity post-Cold War. But now in the new environment we're in, it's on a whole new standard, which I'll try to chat about that a little bit. As we see it here at Strategic Command, we see fundamentally that we're in a situation that the world has never seen before. This is breaking new ground. So we've had a Cold War before, a Cold War for a very long period of time, to where you had two poles, if you will, that some countries were drawn to one way or the other. You had two significant nuclear powers, and so today, though, however, is somewhat different. So today we're looking at the first time that if you put on the United States aspect of this, we are facing two pure nuclear powers, and that is different. We also have a nuclear North Korea on top of that, of which obviously North Korea did not espouse a nuclear capability during the Cold War. So in this way, we are in a significantly different situation, and dare I say, an historic situation. So, and also for the first time, I think, since the end of the Cold War, we're finding ourselves in a situation to where we no longer can assume the risk of a strategic deterrence failure is zero. Now, I would submit the likelihood of that is low, but it is not zero. That is worth hearkening back to. The days of being a nation that can project power in a permissive operational environment without regard to a nuclear response is no longer nil as well. That is I believe to be low, but it is not zero. So in this vein, I think we also have other things to discuss. That the intellectual capital to be able to address the world we're in, it's challenged. Obviously, during the Cold War, we had people very deep into deterrence theory. We even had powerful public debates along those things, and and same with our allies and friends and adversaries. And so there was a discussion that was ongoing with that. Well, I'll go back to my own experience, as mentioned in the bio, that I go back to 1988. So I was a missile launch officer under the plains of South Dakota, doing nuclear alert duty during the Cold War. But can we say that I, as a lieutenant on missile duty, was an expert on deterrence theory? Obviously no. I was a practitioner. I was not an expert. There were experts, but now we have too few of those experts now, and we need to grow them. But in the same vein, I think that we have lessons that we can and should learn from the Cold War, but we don't want to emulate everything, because this is a different situation. Exactly as I mentioned before, it's not one near peer nuclear power we're discussing. It's two, with China and Russia, as well as with a espoused nuclear capable North Korea. Too, which makes us quite a bit different. So I think that venues like this and other venues can continue to grow this human capital in deterrence theory, and also understanding that while there are lessons we can learn from the Cold War, this is a different environment and we must treat it differently. So along those points, let me hit a couple of the large perspectives here before we focus more on North Korea. One is Russia. The way we see it, Russia is the pacing threat. Russia is aggressively engaged in conventional and advanced development, nuclear modernization efforts, and I'd estimate on their efforts, they're about 80% complete with the recapitalization of their nuclear triad and supporting capabilities such as nuclear command, control, and communication. Quite frankly, it's easier to describe what Russia is not modernizing than it is to describe what they are. And I think we have an open mic. Altman, there you go. Thank you. And so, just to review the bidding, they're modernizing their fixed ICBMs, modernizing their mobile ICBMs, modernizing their air leg, their SSBNs, their fleet ballistic missile submarines, as well as the missiles that go in them. Their SSGNs, their cruise missile carrying submarines with the Sevron-Vinsk class. Their novel nuclear weapons, which are outside of START accountability, and to include an intercontinental nuclear armed torpedo, a nuclear armed Skyfall cruise missile that is nuclear powered. On top of that, while we have recently, recently, of course, extended the New START treaty, which is good in that we extend the status quo of this New START treaty. However, we also have to recognize that it does not account for the approximately 2,000 non-START accountable operational weapons that Russia could employ in theater, and I think that is a significant to draw mention to. Russia also continues to violate international law and fails to follow through on political commitments, to include undermining and eroding the current rules-based order and our collective influence within that structure. Russia has expanded the circumstances of which they would consider nuclear employment. Additionally, they have publicly tout their advancements in counter space capabilities aimed at degrading, disrupting, and denying other space users. Their anti-satellite programs and space satellite jammers threaten our intelligence and missile defense capabilities. Similar to China, Russia also poses a significant cyber threat. Between 2018 and 2019 alone, there have been an estimated increase of breaches in the order of 17%. And I'm sure this audience knows well the exploitation of solar winds, to where Russia continued to be highly effective at disrupting, damaging, and infiltrating our networks. So Russia continues to wrestle with a mismatch between their aggressive policies toward their neighbors and being overmatched with conventional capabilities. So what we see is that with their nuclear expansion and return to coercive behavior, I can only conclude that the possibility of deterrence in crisis, particularly a nuclear crisis, is no longer zero. So, anyways, I acknowledge the likelihood is small, but the risk to strategic deterrence failure is something of concern. Moving on to China. So, for quite some time, we'd always concluded that China was a lesser included, especially in the area of nuclear capabilities, and that is no longer the case. So China is on our, we'd also say that China was on a trajectory to be a nuclear pure power, maybe by the end of the decade. Well, that doesn't capture what we're seeing more recently. More recently, we're seeing their rapid expansion of their strategic and nuclear capabilities, and they do this under an obscure, nothing to see here approach. They seem not to be interested in talking about arms control, especially as we were, working on some of those aspects with continuation of the New START treaty some months ago. It looks like President Xi considers nuclear weapons to be an integrated part of their great power status, an expansion with their road mobile systems to where their numbers are improving dramatically. A new solid-fueled ICBM, which augments their current liquid-fueled ICBM force. The Gen-class submarines, of which they now have enough of them, we believe, to where they can have a continuous at-sea presence. Their air-breathing leg, to where they are enhancing their abilities to round out a triad, to have a land-based systems, which they've had for many years, now a sea-based, and then now emerging is going to be an air-based nuclear triad. And so to deter and deny the regional force protection, China is expanding new missile technology and also expanding their anti-access air denial capabilities. There's increasing evidence that they are moving a portion of their nuclear forces to a launch on warning posture and adopting a limited high alert duty strategy, while taking advantage of new capabilities, which could include missile warning capabilities, as well as a nuclear command control and communication modernizations. So more importantly, China's collaboration with North Korea is problematic, and it's problematic for maintaining strategic deterrence and for stability in the Indo-Pacific region. So probably of a bit more pertinence to this forum is North Korea. So of course, just speaking clearly, and this will be no surprise to anyone in this forum, that North Korea, of course, remains a security challenge to the United States, our allies, and immediate neighbors in the Indo-Pacific region. Since his rise to power in 2011, North Korea's Kim Jong-un has greatly increased North Korea's weapons development programs and has regularly tested new weapons. He has directed over 119 ballistic missile launches, which is almost double the number that his father and his grandfather launched with their very long histories of being leaders of North Korea. Kim Jong-un's desire to keep the Kim family and specifically himself in power and to deter the United States fuels his ambitions to develop new and more powerful weapons. The fact that North Korea continues to fund its weapons activities with illicit activities brings instability to the region and the globe. These weapons include close and short-range ballistic missiles that can easily threaten the entire Korean Peninsula and as far as southern Japan, medium-range ballistic missiles that can threaten the Japanese mainland, and North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile force can range Hawaii, Alaska, and in fact the U.S. homeland. So in addition, they're also adding high explosives, cluster, and chemical weapons, and many of these systems can be mated to a ballistic missile, be it again short range, intermediate range, or perhaps longer than that. The COVID-19 pandemic and international sanctions have done little to deter North Korea's research and developmental efforts. Between 2019 and today, North Korea developed at least 3 new short-range ballistic missiles, one of them which could hinder Allied ballistic missile defense capabilities, and 3 new submarine ballistic missile launches. They've conducted over 27 missile launches since the beginning of 2019, including launches of 2 probable cruise missiles just a couple weeks ago, as well as 2 short-range ballistic missile launches. These launches and missiles and systems and capabilities pose a clear and present threat to the Korean Peninsula and those in the Indo-Pacific region. In October 2020, North Korea marked its 75th anniversary of the Korean Workers' Party. And with their military parade, which they're famous in doing, revealed the largest intercontinental ballistic missile airframe on the largest transporter erector that we've seen in their parades to date. Kim Jong-un has not limited his research and development to only ground-based systems. In 2019, they also revealed they modified one of the Romeo-class submarines to carry ballistic missiles. So while, yes, the Romeo-class submarine is dated, it's 1950s, and I would not call it a blue water fleet submarine, but at least in the green water or in the coastal waters, it could prove to have a survivable missile delivery capability. So anyways, I've chatted about Russia, I've chatted about China, and now about North Korea. And so, as we look at North Korean and the challenges with strategic deterrence, that strategic deterrence is the foundation of our national defense policy and enables every military operation around the world. Every operational plan that the United States has operates on the foundation that strategic deterrence is maintained. And we're in an environment to where we can't always make that assumption. And if that assumption would not be the case, then the existing operational plans that the department has would not operate or execute in the way of which they are designed. And so that's another challenge that we have in this environment. North Korea remains a destabilizing force in the region. They continue to conduct activities that threaten strategic deterrence. Some might believe that the threat is not credible, but that they are likely thinking about it in isolation. But in the broader context of how nations use militaries to accomplish their political aims, this could apply to North Korea as well. Kim Jong-un values his ability to stay in power. In that vein, consider this. If Kim Jong-un found himself on the losing side of a conventional conflict, using a nuclear weapon to terminate the conflict to a point of their interest, might be the least bad option to achieve their aims. Man, this is a profound thought. And so they kick off a conventional conflict. They are losing the conventional conflict, and in the vein of maintaining the regime, decide to take this into the nuclear domain. And anyways, very, very concerning. When in doubt, always quote the vice chairman, General Hyten. And so in that vein, I'd like to pull up a quote or two from him. General Hyten has said that we have to make sure that as we go forward, we maintain the ability to deny the North Koreans the ability to effectively attack the United States with confidence. I believe his comments are spot on. So in that vein, missile defense capabilities endures as a critical component for our comprehensive strategic and tailored regional deterrence. U.S. STRATCOM executes its responsibilities for coordinating global missile defense planning and operations and resource or support, including advocating for capabilities and enhancements, joint training and education with our components, other combatant commands, the services, and agencies. While current capabilities provide defense of the homeland against an increasingly capable rogue ballistic missile threats such as North Korea, the ground-based mid-course defense system is neither intended nor sized to offset the large and more sophisticated strategic arsenals of Russia and China. So clearly, our national defense capability against ballistic missiles is focused on rogue nations, not on China and Russia. We rely on our strategic deterrence to counter such threats to our homeland. Rather, we'll use the full suite of missile defense capabilities to counter regional threats from any adversary. Therefore, a concerted effort and commitment is required to expand and improve existing capabilities for both the homeland and for regional missile defense. Mitigating trans-regional threats with increased range and lethality requires more than just active missile defense. Navigating this environment requires a broad approach, leveraging opportunities to negate missile threats prior to launch, during all phases of flight, and as well as after impact. So addressing missile threat aspect is just part of our approach. Our effort needs to deter North Korea and to change the behavior of Kim Jong-un's regime. The best way to do that is from collaboration and leveraging the international community. So obviously, Admiral Richard joins with the supporting the Department of Defense and the State Department's efforts to coordinate with regional partners to reduce military tensions and to engage in diplomatic efforts towards achieving the denuclearization of North Korea. Our alliances and our special bond with the Republic of Korea and Japan and others are a critical piece of the equation that sustains strategic deterrence in the Indo-Pacific region and, in fact, the world. So these partnerships will enable us to continue to deter North Korea and hopefully bring stability to the Indo-Pacific region. So again, thanks for allowing me to come to this forum. Sorry you're getting the B or C strain and not Admiral Richard personally. And I think we have plenty of opportunity now for some questions. So I stand ready to do my best to capture what you would like to discuss and to give you one man's view.
Thank you, General. That's great. Richard White.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for speaking with us today, General. Your comments tie in well with my question. I'm conducting a study for the Defense Department on Russian and Chinese hypersonic capabilities and their implications for the U.S. combatant commands. And I, of course, be happy to brief your team on the project if there's any interest. One issue that's arisen is whether Russia or China, perhaps inadvertently or through third parties, could share these capabilities with North Korea. Have you seen any indication that the North Korean missile program is benefiting from access to Russian or Chinese technologies?
Thank you, Richard.
No, thank you for that question. So, I guess I'll try to hit that from a couple of different angles. So first of all, obviously, if I were to have intelligence, obviously this would not be the forum that I'd be able to share it in that vein, and I know that you understand that for appropriate reasons. But I would offer this, that countries always have more opportunity through exfiltration, through borrowing, through stealing other capabilities. And if you were to look at the rise of Kim Jong-un's space and ballistic missile programs, they learned from work that had been done from the initial powers in this area, which would be from Bernard Schriever, from Russia's efforts. And so what it does, it provides them the advantage of learning more quickly and able to develop capabilities that you typically wouldn't have thought they'd be able to do so in the pace at which they do. So whenever a new capability hits the market, you're always concerned about proliferation of that capability. What's that saying? You always want to keep up with the Joneses. Well, I think hypersonics might be that next area where people want to keep up with the Joneses, and so anyways, I would doubt that this is just Fred Stoss's opinion. I would doubt that Russia or China would share with them hypersonic technologies, but I wouldn't doubt that North Korea wants to keep up with the Joneses, and that as they develop and enhance their ballistic missile capabilities, that they would envision to do the same thing with hypersonics. Sir, does that make sense? Any reattacks on that?
That's fine. Thank you, General.
Thank you, General. David Maxwell, please. David Maxwell?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
General, thank you for your comments and excellent overview. I really appreciate it. But I hope you can channel Admiral Richard for this question, as I was intending to capitalize on his experience as an expert submariner. But I want to ask for your assessment. And of course, obviously, classification issues are at hand. But I was wondering if you could provide an assessment of North Korea's developing SLBM capabilities. And really, do you think that the North Korea is really capable of developing a viable second strike capability via SLBM? And if so, do you assess that it will take, how long would it take to become operational and pose a real significant threat to the United States?
Thank you, David.
Yes, sir. I don't know if I can get to the latter portion of your statement, but on the prior portion, like I mentioned before, it's a 1950s submarine, and so it's very aged. But they have demonstrated the ability to launch the SLBM, and then but the ability to build ballistic missiles that would be operational, we just don't know yet. But that being said, any capability along these lines is a concern. So that they've already demonstrated a short range missile, land-based missiles, medium range, intermediate range, long range, and this just adds to the mix. And so there are valid reasons to be concerned about this capability, albeit an older, noisy, green water, not blue water submarine. So anyways, I picked Admiral Richard's brain to the best of my ability on that, and I hope that suffices, David. Over.
No, thanks, sir. I understand. And yeah, I think we need to take it seriously, but obviously not overreact either. So I appreciate your comments. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. John Lee, please.
General, thank you for your time and your comments. Deterrence, obviously, at the most basic level, is about being able to impose unacceptable costs on an opponent, or at least more cost than they're prepared to bear in some situation. You spoke about Kim Jong-un possibly considering the nuclear option if he was losing a conflict or a war. But to deter Pyongyang or even Beijing from even considering kinetic action, do we think enough about prohibitive and devastating political costs, or do you think we're sometimes a bit too siloed just in a military sense when it comes to deterrence?
No, I agree with your premise. In the U.S. military, in our professional military education, perhaps you've heard this term. I'm sure you probably have. We call it DIME: D for diplomatic, I for informational, M for military, and E for economic. And so each one of those is a lever. And so some scenarios you want to be heavy on some levers and light on others. And in other cases you want to readjust your levers of national power. So I think that applies nationally. It applies internationally, and so also kind of getting to your point that I think that now that we have not a return to Cold War 2.0, we're in a different world. Not to spend too much time reviewing what I had said earlier, but we have to remember one thing from the Cold War that perhaps we lost, and that is that everything's connected. And so right now we're in what you would call the gray zone, right, to where we are below crisis. But the things that happen in the gray zone are connected to a crisis that could be then connected to a conflict that could then, in the worst cases, find their way into a limited nuclear exchange. And then when you get into a limited nuclear exchange, you could find your way into an extreme nuclear exchange with extreme consequences. Everything's linked. So when you're dealing with nuclear powers, you have to think through everything as you look at this. We call this escalation dynamics here in U.S. Stratcom, and so as you, it makes the world much more complicated. But by the way, though, that's reality, and so while it's a inconvenient complication that maybe we didn't have to worry about 10 or 20 years ago, we do now, and then so forums like this and other forums to allow that academic insight and to and then ultimately to work this into arms control and to effective strategies to reduce these threats and risks. That's nothing but good. But I think we're on the nascent level right now of working through these escalation dynamics and all the ramifications therein, and then looking at all the opportunities you mentioned, because certainly. While I wear a uniform, the opportunities clearly are not just the military, and maybe it's small m and big E, or something along those lines, to get at these problems. And certainly the M, the military element, is not always the best tool. Over.
Thank you, General. Tong Kim.
Thank you, General, for doing this for us. Last month, President Biden issued national security strategy guidance, in which he said he will take steps to reduce the role of nuclear weapons. How this new direction or instruction is going to affect the ongoing modernization of a triad based on 2018 nuclear posture review, modernizing them and also developing new and more of the tactical nuclear weapons, perhaps to complement the vacuum that will be created because of the obligation of the INF Treaty with Russia.
Thank you, Tom.
So trying to be a sharp briefer here, I actually brought part of the president's strategy with me. I also have the nuclear posture review here, so I can thumb through that. So if you don't mind for the audience, I do like that question. That to your point, sir, President Biden said we will take steps to reduce the role of nuclear weapons in our national security strategy while ensuring our strategic deterrent remains safe, secure, and effective, and that our extended deterrent commitments to our allies remain strong and credible. And so, as I try to unpack that a little bit, because I think there are many important themes in the president's statement on that. So first of all, a challenge is that despite the U.S.'s concerted efforts to reduce the role of nuclear weapons, and by the way, other presidents have had this policy as well, right? That we want to reduce the role of nuclear weapons. That's very important and noble path to be on. But it is challenged by our adversaries. In fact, our adversaries since 2010, when the New START Treaty went into effect, since 2010, our adversaries are doing the opposite. They are increasing the numbers, their capabilities, and their roles with their national strategies. So STRATCOM is focused on extending from deterring strategic attack from any adversary, and we execute tailored deterrent options to directly influence adversary behavior. And so, consistent with the president's guidance to continue our extended deterrence commitments to our allies and ensuring our force remains safe, secure, and effective, we are recapitalizing our nuclear forces to include our nuclear command and control capabilities. And so, kind of getting back to the big picture, I am confident that in U.S. STRATCOM's ability to deter a North Korean attack, a nuclear attack today and into the future. And so I think all of this is synchronized. And so, just going back to the president's statement, that in a very noble way, we want to take steps. We will take steps to reduce the role of nuclear weapons in our national security strategy. But at the same time, we have to make sure that our nuclear triad remains safe, secure, and effective. Because if it's not, we won't be able to honor our extended deterrence commitments. And so I think all of this is packaged together in that way. Sir, does that answer your question? Over.
Thank you. Sid Kecker?
Yes, General Stoss, thank you very much for a very informative briefing. I had submitted a question related to deterrence and specifically sort of what is STRATCOM's assessment of North Korea's ability to deter the United States, both conventional as far as nuclear, but you've covered deterrence quite a lot, but I'll leave that on the table. And your comments brought up one very specific question. After discussing the Chinese capabilities, you said Chinese collaboration with North Korea is problematic. And I just wanted to know what you meant by that. Was that specifically related to military systems and issues, or was it more general? Thank you.
Yes, I hopefully I've scratched the itch as well as I could at this classification on our deterrence philosophies and strategies. But to your latter point, I think it's pretty clear with who Kim Jong-un has friendly relations with. I think it's pretty clear that not so much with the South and not so much with other neighbors. It appears to me to be one neighbor that they're most closely aligned with, and so I'm not smart enough to know all the whys and the therefores, but if we were to have the most influence on having Kim Jong-un and his nation joining the family of nations, I think it would be through their neighbor. I think that their neighbor would have the strongest ability to influence, bringing them in the fold. and I think it's challenged for whatever reason for them to do so. So they must have interests that they don't want to try hard enough to really bring them into the family of nations. And because they have so many, we talked about levers before. If want to talk about DMIME, clearly China would have so many levers to influence North Korea. But it seems as if it is not in their interest to do so. Does that make sense? Over.
Yeah, General, let me just add, yes, it does make sense, but let me add sort of a different view of the China connection. What you said is typically what we hear, and that is, you need China. And I would agree to say, if you want to punish North Korea, or you want to push them in a direction, you need China. You can't do it without them. If you want to attract North Korea, to pull them in the right direction, maybe you need the United States and South Korea more than you need China. That's just my own view.
Thank you, Sig.
No, that's an interesting point. And there is this thing called your lane. And so I'm here at US Stratcom, and I'm a military member. But I think outside of my lane, I think you bring up some interesting opportunities, and I think it would be in the world's interest to explore every opportunity, to include those that you espouse. Over.
Thank you. Patrick Cronin.
Thank you, General. You've made clear that North Korea is not the first or even second strategic threat, but I still want to ask you further questions on deterrence in North Korea. For one, the Biden administration, Deputy Secretary Hicks, for instance, has made clear that deterrence by punishment rather than denial should be the emphasis. So my two-part question is, have we, in your estimation, made a clear declaratory statement in public to Kim Jong-un that the use or transfer of strategic weapons will be punished most severely? And secondly, you mentioned one scenario for escalation, but if Kim Jong-un makes good on his promise in January to acquire tactical nuclear weapons, are there additional practical operational implications in your view? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to unpack some of that. On your first point, sir, and I'm not trying to be too cute, but that's probably more of a State Department aspect. However, I see exactly where you're going, and I think that there certainly is something there. So in terms of statements, I think one thing that I brought a copy of it with me. It's out on the internet, and I'm sure this audience has seen this in spades. But on the 18th of March, a joint U.S. ROK statement was made when our State Department Secretary and the Defense Secretary met with their counterparts in ROK. Man, powerful points were brought up in that thing. So I'll just read a couple. That the ministers and secretaries affirmed that ROK-U.S. alliance, forged in blood on the battlefields 70 years ago, serves as a linchpin of peace, security, and prosperity. And then this part. U.S. officials reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to the defense of ROK and its extended deterrence using the full range of U.S. capabilities. Man, that's pretty clear and direct. And so if you haven't seen this, please Google this one, because I'm sure it's out there and available. And then you raised the point that Kim Jong-un in his last party address, he did highlight tactical, a desire or a goal to make tactical weapons, so I'll kind of unpack that one a little bit. So what is a tactical weapon? I think it usually fits in a couple different camps. One camp is one with limited range use. Theater use would be the term that we would generally use. Another one would be low yield, or maybe a combination thereof. And sir, the way that I look at it is, whether you call it strategic, whether you call it tactical, it's not about the range, it's not about the yield, it's about first use of it. I would argue that even if you have a low yield weapon, it could be used in the theater, it could have a very strategic impact. In fact, I would determine that if a weapon like that was used with ill will, that would be a strategic attack, and that you would have lost strategic deterrence with that weapon being used. And so yes, I'm not. It doesn't. I'm not going to sleep any more peaceful knowing that not only are they pursuing larger yield weapons, but to even lower yield weapons. But to me, it's not the yield, it's not the range, it's the element of first use of that weapon with ill will. That will be epic to the region and epic to the world, and that's what we have to deter. Over.
Thank you, sir.
General. Okay, Bruce Bennett. If not, I give a bonus to David Maxwell. Yeah.
All right, you got me on the spot. So, General, to follow up on some of the questions, I do think that that North Korea offers challenges, for using nuclear weapons, beyond, ending a war that it might be losing. I mean, I really think we have to think, as I think Patrick was really alluding to, that they might employ nuclear weapons, from the beginning, at least tactically. I mean, I think for them to be successful in their war plan, they have to dominate the entire peninsula before the U.S. can reinforce. And so I think all ports, of embarkation, air and sea, are vulnerable. Plus, locations in Japan, for intermediate staging bases, I think are all vulnerable. And and I just wonder if our thinking about the use of nuclear weapons and North Korea's thinking about the use of nuclear weapons are really aligned. Meaning for us, or at least from my perspective, nuclear weapons are a last resort, something we don't want to do. We want to deter use. But I really wonder if the North Koreans just view nuclear weapons, along with chemical and biological, as just tools that the regime can employ to achieve its objectives. And so that there might be first use of the full spectrum of weapons of mass destruction if they initiate their campaign plan. And as you said, Kim Jong-un faced with dilemmas, my worst fear is even internal threats, internal instability and collapse, his only option may be to execute his campaign plan to unify the peninsula under the domination of the guerrilla dynasty and Gulag state to ensure regime survival, which I think we all agree regime survival is the priority. So my question is, are we thinking about North Korean first use of the full spectrum of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, biological? And of course, the $64,000 question is, how do we deter that use and prevent it from use? So more questions.
Well, thanks for that really easy one as we get towards the end of this. So a few things I would offer. So first off, you raise a powerful point. We have to remember a couple things about warfare and capabilities that use in warfare, to include domains, to include the nuclear domain. It's the adversary which always picks the domain that you operate in. And so if you are operating conventionally, the adversary gets first vote on that. If they decide to go into cyber, we don't decide that. They do. If they decide to go anti-space, like some of the adversaries that I mentioned have capabilities of, if you decide to go chem, bio, or nuclear, not our call to make, it's the adversary's call to make. And by the way, the same is true on war termination. Unless you have an unlimited aim for war termination, it's the adversary who determines if it's over. It's not you. And so these things are very dangerous when you get into the nuclear domain, because we don't get to vote. The adversary has 100% of the vote. Now, we get to influence that vote, though, and so that goes back to escalation dynamics. So again, sir, everything's connected. So you talked about they go big early, because I use this side over here for the extreme nuclear or limited nuclear. It's all connected. So the way you do it is by competing and deterring from the gray zone into crisis, into conflict. And there's inflection points that based on what we do and what we don't do, there's an inflection point of if it increases the likelihood of deterring and getting back down into the lower level of escalation dynamics, or the enemy gets a vote. They could decide, no, I'm going to go to the next step. And so this is a very cognitive, because deterrence is all about the cognitive. It's all about the brain. We have to getting back to my theme, we have to get our brains caged back in that world again, because we haven't been there for a long time. But we're there with two near nuclear powers, and then we're there with a nuclear North Korea, which was not the case during the Cold War, when we had a lot of thinking in that area. So I hope that kind of wraps it up a little bit. But I agree with you. It's a valid concern. We have to do our best. I would just highlight, the statement that I read, though. I won't read it again, but everyone just needs to acknowledge that the U.S. has reaffirmed our commitment to the defense of ROK to include the full range of capabilities. Over.
Yes, sir, I agree.
General Murray Levine.
It is the cognitive domain, and I just wonder if we are not mirror imaging, North Korea. I mean, if they really think about escalation dominance in many of the theoretical areas that we do. And I agree, we have to get inside Kim Jong-un's head. I just don't think. I worry that he may not be thinking along the same concepts that we are, and that's my big fear. I'll stop there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Murray Levine.
Thank you. General, I join my ICAS colleagues in thanking you for your most welcome presentation. I want to ask you about whether the disputed islands in the South China Sea are now considered a fait accompli. Are they operational? Is it something we are going to have to live with? And also, could you say a word or two about the Space Command and how it's integrated into the Strategic Command? Thank you.
Hey, sir, I'll have to probably address more of your latter point. On the first point, again, it's that thing called your lane, and I'm not the commander of Indo-PACOM or responsible for that AOR. So I really do like the question. It's a very good question, but I would just be getting out of my lane and out of my expertise if I were to go there. But on your latter point on space, I'm really happy to highlight that we have what we call warfighter talks with our fellow combatant commands, especially the combatant commands which operate in a non-kinetic way, such as a space and cyber, and so as you might imagine, that we see the challenges very, very much the same. The adversaries won't respect the artificial lines that the geographic commands have chopped the world into. It's a global endeavor, and things like space capabilities, cyber capabilities, and the nuclear domain very much is global, and so in that way we're very much joined at the hip, because I mentioned before that our job is to prevent strategic attack. We are to defend the homeland, prevent strategic attack, and that includes the nuclear element, but that includes that includes non-nuclear strategic attacks as well. And the cyber domains and space domains are examples where those could be. And so in that way, as we develop strategies, these strategies have to be integrated, and they have to be cross-domain. So just as I mentioned, escalation dynamics from the gray zone all the way up to extreme circumstances, the same is true across all domains, to include conventional, to include cyber, to include space, to include nuclear. And so in that way, I'm honored to partner with our U.S. Space Command and U.S. Space Forces. Over.
Thank you, General. William King, please.
So thank you for your presentation and thoughtful, thought-provoking engagement. I've posted a number of questions in the chat just for ideas or for stirring the pot a little bit. But one that really stirs my heart is, what are the prospects for U.S.-China cooperation in planning for DPRK denuclearization? And can we achieve non-kinetic success in denuclearization without China's full support? And if not, can we accept North Korea's continued development, and what are the implications for Japan and South Korea, realizing that maybe they have to develop their own nuclear defense capabilities? Thank you.
Thank you, William.
Wow, I don't know how to add to that one other than to say yes. We need to let no opportunity go by, and it is in the region's interest. It's in the world's interest to denuclearize North Korea. And we need to convince them that it's in their interest. But hence our challenge, because we, at the same time, we have to also appreciate we are where we are, and we have to make the best of where we are. So, anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Tom McDavid?
Oh, thanks so much, General.
Okay.
Thanks for the excellent presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Okay.
Loud and clear.
General, could you give us your assessment of the emergence of the so-called Quad in terms of critical alliance to the United States? That's my question. How do you see the Quad and the relevance of the Quad over the next 5 years or so?
Thank you, Tom.
Hey, sir, would you mind? Again, I'm new to the movie. I've only been here about 6 or 7 months or so I'm not tracking on the Quad. Over.
Oh, the alliances with between the United States, the nations of India, Japan, and Australia. In other words, building our Indo-Pacific allies, strengthening that coalition, especially in contrast to the threat emergence of China, which obviously is the big elephant in the room related to North Korea. So,
right. Yes, of course. We have. Once again, I'll try to keep this in my military lane as opposed to getting into other lanes. It appears to me is that if America has many advantages, one of them is we have real allies, allies. And so when you look at our adversaries, I don't think you can find any alliances in there. They will have partnerships of convenience. And by the way, the conveniences they have partnerships on are generally against the world order and with ill will. Whereas we have real alliances with real opportunities and stake in the game. That's awesome. And then if you let me brag on our force, we also have the best soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardians, and Coast Guardsmen in the world. And so when you combine those two things, I think that there's always opportunity for us to partner together more, to exercise together more, to integrate better, to integrate globally, to enhance our ability to see the threat, to have options to deal with the threat, and then to be able to do so with command and control, which can operate faster and more effective than those of our adversaries, and to make sure adversaries know that. And I think there's already a strong deterrent approach to that today. And to your point, I think that's going to be needed more and more and more as time goes on, because we see with the growth of China where that is going, and so we have to work these always and often to enhance those relationships and our commitments. And so I guess I'm trying to say I'm in violent agreement with you. We absolutely have to do that. We have to do it better, and I believe we are. I believe we are. Over.
Thank you, General. Okay, Patrick Cronin, it's a bonus.
I see Mr. Beyer wanted to ask a question. Do you want to give him a chance, Jack
Sure.
Beyer?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dad. Really appreciate that. Thank you for your time tonight, sir. I'm very attentive to this conversation about your lane. But one thing I'm curious about, as you mentioned, Russia and China particularly as the pacing threats here. Many of our allies are sort of under our larger nuclear deterrent umbrella. And as we sort of talk about, this pivot away from nuclear sort of modernization potentially in sort of the national security strategy that was laid out a couple of weeks ago. I'm curious, if you're having conversations with your counterparts in sort of the defense ministries of our allies and partners, and how they're thinking through, the future of the American nuclear umbrella in that regard. Thank you.
Yes. So, the president had highlighted the continued importance of a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent, and he also highlighted the importance of our extended commitments with deterrence. And so, I think that our allies are assured by that, and so from our connections, we very much pick up on that, and so that's why we have this force. We have this force to assure our allies and our friends and partners. But also to deter our adversaries, and it's a package deal. If you do one really well and you don't do the other, you're going to find yourself into a bad situation. And so we work both aspects very very hard. And so we have absolutely a credible, lethal nuclear deterrent force today. We will have the same thing into the future. And so our adversaries have good reason to be deterred with our capabilities. Conversely, our allies, I read the statement a couple of times that between the U.S. and the ROK, it doesn't just extend to them; it extends to many. To your point, and so I think that we'll probably have opportunities of reviewing this with the new administration. So possibly opportunities with a refreshed nuclear posture review, and that will be a chance to have one more chance to refresh our perspectives with our allies and our partners, because obviously as we do things along these lines, I would imagine our State Department would join with our allies and talk through concepts and strategies as part of that review if one were to take place. Over.
Thank you, General. Bruce Bennett out there?
He's written his question, Sangjo. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, please read.
Bruce Bennett of RAND writes that my first boss at RAND told me that the first casualty of any conflict is usually the war plan. If war breaks out in Korea, in which the North uses nuclear weapons after OPCON transition and the plans need changes, how well prepared will the ROC Combined Forces Commander be for working with Stratcom Commander to adjust their integrated conventional and nuclear operations concepts, including time-urgent targeting with nuclear weapons? So this is a post-OPCON question about the Korean Peninsula and our command arrangements, and whether Stratcom is well prepared to work with the ROC CFC commander who will be taking over.
Thank you.
Yes, probably many of you are aware of war planning precepts, regardless of domain, right? And so, as part of the plan, you understand the threat. You try your best to understand what the enemy courses of action would be. You understand your capabilities. You look at courses of action that you can do, and then you compare and contrast. You compare and contrast the adversary's worst case scenario to you, the most likely, and perhaps the best case, and then you basically war game those together. And the one thing that you always know, to your point, that there are many famous military quotes that I'll paraphrase, is no plan meets first contact, and the enemy always gets a vote. And so we can just keep on rolling into more and more of those things. So everything you said was accurate in that vein. Well, how I think this would go with Commander U.S. Stratcom, Commander USFK, and Commander Indo-PACOM is going back to General Abrams. As I see it, General Abrams has three hats. He's the commander of the United Nations mission, commander of the CFC. That is to your question, and also commander of USFK. Well, it's the latter that is pertinent. The commander of USFK that is part of the U.S. organization. So the UN thing, multilateral, the CFC bilateral, and the commander USFK is the U.S. organization that is a sub-unified command of U.S. Indo-PACOM. So what I would envision that if there would be some type of thing that would involve U.S. Stratcom, that it would be under the hat of Commander USFK, as well as the sub-unified command of I think I saw the question up there of the Indo-PACOM. So I would see Admiral Davidson, Admiral Richard, and General Abrams using his USFK hat for that. Over.
Thank you very much, General. And time is up. And let's give General a big round of applause.
Thank you, General.
General, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, General. We'll get back to you again. Thank you, General.
Thank you.
God bless. Okay.
All the best.
Thank you.